Brandon Harris, thank you for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
Jason Itkin, nice to see you, sir.
Nice to see you too.
As the general manager of the University of Texas football team, kind of explain what you do and all the different responsibilities and how you manage it.
Yeah. I always tell people when they ask me what my role is to generally manage, right? That's every facet of the organization. And when you think of generally manage, it covers pretty much everything you can think you could do in an organization. Whether that's the business side on how we, retain our players, I would say with a value, staff, anything that coach needs in that regards, being able to kind of help be the go-between and kind of see things down the road of different ways we can always continue to adapt. And then obviously attract and retain the best players in the country, right? To come to this university, which I think we're spoiled a little bit because I think we have it really, really well. Most of the time you're on the phone with agents and or parents, kind of educating them on the landscape of how college athletics is changing and answering any questions they may have. During the season, a ton of meetings, right? You're in meetings all the time. Obviously it's a lot of prep work for the games. You're scouting kind of the players that we're recruiting, building out boards kind of for future classes. And then at that point, you start to kind of figure out what your needs are from a portal standpoint. And so we'll meet with our personnel staff and kind of go through those things. And at that same time, you're trying to kind of put your retention plan together for the guys you want to retain on your team, because we live in a world of capitalism and all of our players are pretty much free agents every 6 months. So you're just kind of always trying to keep your ear to the ground on that. Anybody that you might feel like that's a flight risk, for lack of a better term, and just have those open conversations with the rep and or their parents and the coaching staff just about needs and players that we want to retain. Or if a guy we think is on the cusp of the chance to go to the NFL and we're trying to retain him back by getting his draft grades, and we're able to give that information to Coach Sarkisian by the time he does his exit interviews. But the day-to-day, the week changes week to week.
Can you walk us through, like, when you played at LSU, what recruiting was like versus what it was like, say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, for sure.
What it was like just last season, and now we've had something called the house settlement, and what it looks like going forward.
Yeah, so I came out of high school in 2014, and I was a highly recruited athlete, and obviously I played quarterback. And so during those days, you really went to the school based on relationship and the system and who the strength coach was that could develop you into whatever athlete that you wanted to be able to maximize your time while you're there. Education mattered too, right? But we all had our sights on the opportunity to go play in the NFL. And so in 2014, literally, 11 years ago, it was totally different, right? NIL, all those things didn't matter. Like you had to...
They didn't exist.
They didn't exist.
Unless somebody showed up with a suitcase full of cash in the back of a trunk.
I don't recognize that, but I understand. Like,
where's my suitcase?
You couldn't even get an extra Encrustable. Like, that was against NCAA rules, right? It was like you couldn't get extra peanut butter. Like, all of those type of things that now don't exist. And my scholarship check at that time was $314 a month, living on campus at LSU, and life was great. Right? You had a little bit of money left over at the end of the month to be able to buy gas. Gas wasn't as high as it is today. And now, kind of fast forwarding to what NIL is today, it wasn't collectives and all those things when NIL first was adopted. I think July of 2021, if I remember correctly, there was no collectives, right? Kids were able to go out and get deals with Gatorade and stuff like that, true NIL. And now, when you talk to a player, whether it's a high school kid or a portal kid, before that kid even gets on the plane, agents want ranges.
So kids now have sports agents,
they do.
Just like the NFL player has an agent.
They do.
And that started because of
That started because of collectives, right?
Now what's Texas One? What's a collective?
So our collective is a 501c3. Donors can give to those collectives and get a full write-off. And there's a for-profit side and there's a nonprofit side. And so how schools were doing it is like, hey, such and such want to, sponsor this player. I'm going to give $100,000 for that player, right? And then the collective would, allocate that towards that certain player. And so the schools, allegedly, with the most money, were able to buy the best players, right? Or the schools that didn't have the most money, complained about schools with larger money being able to come get their players, right? And so for us, no one capitalized more off name, image, likeness than us. We were able to attract really good players and be able to retain our players. But how NIL was screwed up, in my opinion, initially is it was going directly to high school kids. This is kind of national at every school, and the players who are All-Americans at these institutions weren't earning anything, right? And so at that time, those players would complain about how this is not fair, and we would agree with them. But at that time, if you were an employee at an institution, you couldn't go out and advocate on behalf of the student athletes here at the institution.
So if you're an 18-year-old, highly recruited person, there's a bidding war going on for that NIL. That kid could get some giant contract that you read about, but you've got a 2-year starter.
That's correct.
Who is
All-American player.
Who's making less money
than
a guy who hadn't even played.
Didn't make anything. For example, we had the Pancake Factory. We were really struggling to get offensive linemen. We had the Pancake Factory where I believe each O-lineman got 50 grand. And that was, you think about it, that's not fair, right? Because you can't be the 16th offensive lineman. And at that point, you're making more than the All-American defensive lineman, right? And Coach ended that, and I thought it was great, and it was beneficial. It helped us get offensive linemen. But again, we weren't trying to take advantage of any rules. They were at our disposal, and we're just trying to make the most of it.
So, Barryn, I hear people complain about they read on ESPN somebody got some giant contract.
Yeah.
But tell kind of a little bit all the different uses of NIL. I hear about parents of players that couldn't afford to come to Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And Austin, Texas is not cheap. Just come to a game.
Yeah.
Kind of walk us through all the different uses, because you are the general manager.
Yeah, for us, to me, that's what it was about, right? It was the opportunity for, if, we had to travel to the West Coast, and let's just say hypothetically play, UCLA or USC, where the player had the means to be able to provide their parents transportation to get there. We aren't able to provide travel to the parents unless we're playing in a postseason bowl game where we can give them mileage to be able to come to the games. And when you think about most of our players, just as kind of across the board, they're family hardships where they may be a single parent household and it's mom and he has 3 younger siblings or 4 younger siblings, right? That they want to come to the game, but they can't afford to come to the game. So again, that's where our advantages were. Being able to take care of them on the collective side where those opportunities would be able to, they could provide them. Parent being able to come in and be able to get a hotel room. You just said it, the city of Austin is booming. And I love that we got the Moody Center across the street, but we have a concert every night, right? Which sometimes they happen on game day weekends, which drives the hotel prices up. And so being able to have that and take advantage of it has created a tremendous opportunities for our student athletes here, and the opportunity to be able to attract a lot of those guys that are national players to come here, right? From California, Florida, where have you. And then those same opportunities, being able to have their parents here locally, where we've had, I think to this point, 18 to 20 current student athletes whose parents and or siblings have relocated to Austin.
And so I know, for example, a Ryan Wingo, who wanted to come to the University of Texas, probably would have gone to Mizzou if we weren't able to help get his family to the games and tickets and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great example. At that time we were recruiting Ryan, Missouri state law had just changed where if they signed a binding agreement, they could start earning NIL in high school. And in the state of Texas, we could not do that. And so that was a disadvantage for us. But Ryan obviously saw light at the end of the tunnel of just the development, right? You think about guys like Xavier Worthy and other receivers that have played for Coach at previous institutions, where he was able to see, okay, that's development. Okay, I want to be developed like that. And when you play at the University of Texas, we compare it, I'm sorry for anybody that don't like, but it's like playing for the Cowboys.
Give me a couple examples of how we were able to retain seniors that wanted to get their degree, but they were getting offers from potentially the draft.
We do a good job of having strong relationships at the NFL level where you're able to kind of get assessments of kind of how those guys view a Michael Taaffe, a Trey Moore, a Jordan Whittington. Barryn Sorrell was a prime example of that. Somebody who I would say was probably the MVP of our defense. Jade Barron, John Michael, who's our NFL liaison, who's our director of player personnel. We collect that data and we get that information to Coach. And so when Coach is starting to have those exit meetings, you kind of keep a little budget to the side of if a guy wanted to come back to be able to retain a Michael Taaffe, who means so much to us and has done it the right way, right? Working hard and earned a scholarship and, was an All-American player last year. Or Trey Moore, who really came on for us kind of midway through the season. Or Barryn Sorrell, again, who's another example who was, probably a defensive MVP outside of Jade, who, 2 players that considered leaving for the draft the previous year. And I think all of those guys kind of earned it. Jade, I probably would tell you, he probably was a 5th or 6th round pick last year. And then the guy goes in the top 20 in the NFL draft. Matt Golden was an example who, obviously he left as a 3rd-year player, but when he came to us, he was a preseason 6th round pick and ended up going the 1st round. So there's a lot of examples of that, but the NIL provides that because it's okay, when you're comparing apples to oranges under the old model, I want to say the minimum in the league is maybe $850, and you think about it, depending on what state you're in, those guys, depending on what city they play in, they're taxed differently. We're in a state where there's no state income tax, and there's a lot of advantages, and there's a lot of opportunities for our guys to leverage the money. Yeah.
What's kind of the track record that y'all have as a coaching staff in terms of, hey, if you come back, like you're going to make more money in the NFL.
We're going to develop you more.
We're going to develop you more. You're going to be a higher draft pick, the second contract, how that all plays into sort of the analysis.
It's tough. And the reason why it's tough is because, when you're dealing with certain agents, there's a lot of agents that get it, and we deal with some of the best at their profession. Sometimes the agents want them in the NFL so they can start the clock.
Start making money off them.
Start making money. And we, on the other end, see the opportunity to get the degree, see the opportunity to development. And selfishly, it's always better if you can get a Michael Taaffe back, a Barryn, a Barryn Sorrell, because they're older, they're seasoned vets, they're great for our locker room. They're System guys, great for the culture. And when you bring in young guys, they can help mold them and teach them our system, of our culture and how we kind of adapt. But to answer your question, we give coach the data, and the data is real. Right, and that's based on what you'll make if you're a 6th-round pick in comparison to if you're a 1st-round pick. Comparing the money of how hard it is to make an NFL roster now. If you go in the 4th, 5th, or 6th, or 7th round, you don't get the same luxury if you're a 2nd or 1st or 3rd-round pick. And so I think given the information, and Coach is amazing because he knows that league. He's been in that league of providing it, or calling a GM who he respects and letting them just hear true information of kind of where they see that player. And normally when they see it, it's been successful. And when you look at the development, we've had, 23 guys drafted in the last 2 years, and we're developing guys at a high clip, which is something
more than any program in the country.
Yeah.
People that follow recruiting really closely, sometimes they melt down when we lose a recruit who's being offered millions and millions of dollars to go to one place, and we don't match them, and they're like, oh, what's going on? The sky is falling. Why don't we, match them? Should they be melting down? Should we be melting down?
I always say panickers panic. We don't believe in that. I have a head coach who I report directly to, who is very consistent every single day. And so when there's no pressure from him on how we operate, it makes everybody else in the building understand that we trust our process of how we evaluate guys and what deals we're willing and not willing to do. And I think for us, it's always going to be about retaining our players, right? Remember, we're agreeing to deals with high school kids before we ever know what it's going to cost to retain our team in December or January. What looks worse? Me giving a player, X amount of money, or losing our starting quarterback because we don't have any money in January? That's when you lose your job. And so my job is to always make sure that I'm brutally honest with our staff, our head coach, who trusts me and understand that when we do deals, we got to do smart deals, right? That's not going to compromise our team, because what we are now in our program, year 5, we have incredible depth, and we've recruited really, really good players. And I don't want to just, invest in them and then, 6 months later or a year later, let them just walk out the door. To me, that's malpractice, and that's not success of an organization.
How often are our guys getting phone calls from other schools before the portal opens where they're tampering with our players?
Yeah, I think it happens more often than we think. If you know a player down the road who is playing on, obviously, an expiring deal, and you know that he's exceeded that, well, it's time to start having those conversations with the parents and the rep to let them know that you're going to take care of the kid. So that kid isn't picking up those calls. I have no way to verify those things. Sometimes those things are a negotiation tactic, right? And you got to be willing to not be leveraged all the time, right? There may be an opportunity where you say, okay, if school X is going to pay you that amount of money, good luck. I would take that deal. Because if you don't, have a foundation and set the groundwork, you're just going to constantly be leveraged. And that's something that, I got to be honest, in my position, is not good, right? Because as you try to plan, and you plan to pay Jimmy X amount of money because you think that's the market value at that position and that player in your organization, and there's another school that's down the road who may not be as talented as we are from a roster standpoint that want to pay him more, you got to be willing to let him go. I say this to Coach all the time. There's no place that's better than Texas.
Hey, what's your favorite thing about your
job? I think being involved in the decision-making. I think that's fun, and team building is super fun for me.
What's the toughest thing about your job?
I always believe in telling the truth. And sometimes people don't like the truth, and that's the hardest part. And so, for example, if you tell Johnny that, hey, we think this is his market value, and the parents don't like to hear it, and they hate you at that point. But I always say the best players on our team love me, The middle part of our team, they hate me. The market value should be where the stars, All-American players are. And the bottom half of our roster, they love you because they're just getting something, right? So they're grateful. But the middle, it's always tough because you're not an All-American player, so we can't pay you that way. And so those are always the toughest conversations.
If you're a business owner or decision maker at a business, either A, like, why should I get involved in NIL? How can it help my business?
Yeah.
Or the other point is like, well, I may have a little bit of money to do this, but not a lot.
One, I would tell you that we're grateful for whatever we get. We never go in and have a set amount that we're asking for. It's just whatever you can do to help provide opportunities for our student athletes is what we're for. I think you paint the picture of just how, by you making this contribution, have changed lives on our team, right? From a player that's from nothing to now his parents can come to the game, or for a player that comes from something, just what he's been able to do with the opportunities he's been doing by giving back to the community. It's a real challenge because I think everybody's kind of fatigued, right? I think the hardest thing is going in and asking for money just because, you know, people have blood, sweat, and tears into, getting to where they are. And by knowing you guys, I know you guys got to where you were you didn't have handouts, right? And so it's a huge challenge, but I think when they see kind of the development of how we're doing as a staff and our players making the right decisions, knock on wood, we don't have players getting arrested and all of those type of things. I know some of them may bump their heads because they're 17, 18 years old, but they can kind of see the growth.
I've bumped my head before.
Yeah. They can see the growth, they can see the culture, they can see all of the right reasons for why you should do it. And their commitment level has made our football team better than what it was when we walked in here day one.
Well, thank you, amigo.
Thank you
for all that you do. Seriously.
Appreciate it.
Very much appreciate you.